I'm the Senior Director of Product Development at Zuri Group, and I'm based out of Orlando. So looks like it's a sunny day here today. I've had lightning strikes that blew my cable out a few times in the past month, so I think we're clear of that today. So a little bit of my history. I worked at Blackbaud from about 2011 to 2016 and been at Zuri Group since then. What we're going to show today is a tool that we came up with at the request of our functional folks to basically allow list builders to be built from the front end of Blackbaud CRM. So I'm going to share my screen here. All right, so hopefully you're seeing Blackbaud CRM. And so it's kind of the history behind this thing. So here's how the session's going to go. I'm going to do a little bit of a functional overview, kind of show the tool, and then I'm going to go into the code. So hopefully you're all interested in seeing some, under the hood coding stuff. But the general idea behind this is that if you go to a regular, an ad hoc query, you have the ability to create a data list. And this is something that any admin in Blackbaud CRM can do. And you can create a data list, and then you can surface it on whatever page you want to. And it's a great feature because people can prototype stuff in front of a client really quickly. You don't have to go through the development process and write a spec and go through all of the overhead of sending stuff to a developer. And so our functional folks at Zuri Group had asked us to create something similar with list builders, because if you're familiar with DataList versus list builders, it's just a generation ahead, right? You've got sorting, per column. You can sort, you can filter, you can choose the columns that you want to show, on a per user basis, and they're just a lot more, user friendly. And so I'll show you the tool that we built real quick before I go into the technical bits. So under administration, let's see, we've got shell design here and user-defined list builder. So we had actually initially tried to stick it next to the create data list button on the ad hoc query screen, but I don't know if any of the technical folks have tried to kind of get into the ad hoc query UI model, and that any of those forms are basically well beyond my capability. So we just figured shell design was a nice place to put it. But so the user experience here, you come in, you add, and you can give it a name. And then pick an ad hoc query. So I've got one built already, so you don't have to watch me stumble through the ad hoc query tool. And then similar to how you can build a data list, you can choose whether or not it is context free or uses context. And so that means, do you want to surface this on a page and have it filter by the record ID that page is accessing, or do you want it to just show all the records all the time? And so this particular one is constituent context. And once you pick context, you have to tell it which column it's going to use. And we kept it really simple on the user interface here. So all of the captions and everything are controlled directly by what you choose in the ad hoc query. So if you want to leave the paths of the ad hoc query in there. So like you can have application details / application. I personally prefer the abbreviated captions in here. So, you know, we chose to just point users to, rename the columns in ad hoc query instead of having to build functionality in our screen for that. So you'll see all the captions. You choose which ones you want visible. All of the columns will be in the list builder, but they will default to hidden if you choose invisible. And so then you can save this, and then so now it's the same experience as you would have with a data list. You need to go into design mode and put it somewhere, right? So I'll go stick this on the constituent page here as another revenue tab or revenue sub tab. And I'm going to add a section. And this is going to be a list builder, obviously. And we did append auto-generated list builder to the name. That may or may not stick. And it defaults to context type as page context. And just for giggles, I'll go ahead and add a go to revenue option on here. So this will be a show page, revenue transaction page. And we're going to use revenue ID as the context for that action. And I can also grab the rev lookup ID here and make that the link field. Save 15 times. And now we have a demo tab, and all the typical benefits of a list builder. You got the customization, you got the filtering, the actions work. So that's it from a functional standpoint. Nothing super groundbreaking there. It's just the same general use case as the data list. So now I'll start going into the code a little bit and try and highlight some of the more interesting things that, interesting design decisions that we did with this. I don't think we're going to have time to go, deep into kind of line by line coding, but that's probably fine with most of you anyway. So first thing I'm going to do is just pull up so pick the top 10 off the query view catalog. And so you can see this is BB Dev Days demo, auto-generated list builder. And so we can take a look at the spec that we actually generated. And so I'm going to pop this into Notepad++ here. Try and make this a little more friendly here. So one of the things that I love this plugins, the XML tools Pretty Print for pasting. We're always messing with big chunks of XML, so I use this thing religiously. And then let's see, under language, let's go XML. So that's a little more obvious. So this is what the auto-generated spec looks like. And the first thing you'll notice here, we've got the ID, and we embed the ID in the object name, because basically the object name doesn't matter. It just needs to be unique. A great way to make it unique is to stick a GUID in it. And we chose to just reuse the same GUID for the table itself. So FC35 is the ID that was auto-generated when we saved the record to the table. And so we just go ahead and use that as the ID for the spec. And it's also the ID to make a nice, unique function name. And we've done a whole lot of code generation over the past few years. So we've kind of established a pattern that we follow here. The next kind of interesting design decision here is, it's a TVF implementation of a query view. And the reason for that is for the context. I personally don't know a way to use a view-based query view and have a filter on it. Maybe one of you do, but I've always dropped into using a TVF implementation when I need to have any kind of parameters on a query view. And so the next piece, so kind of around the topic of the parameter and the context. So the next thing was, we're taking an ad hoc query. We're taking the SQL directly from ad hoc query. And we had to decide, all right, how are we going to modify this SQL to have a where clause in it? And then you quickly realize, okay, well, the SQL may already have a where clause in it. It's possible, but I don't know if there's subqueries that are generated from the query tool, but it might have multiple where clauses in it. So we started thinking, all right, how are we possibly going to reliably append criteria to this query? And so I decided to just do a subselect. So if you'll see the first select star from here, and then we name it QRY for queries, just lack of creativity there. But so this subselect, by wrapping the whole thing in a subselect, we know that we are always going to have one easy where clause that we can wrap around whatever SQL the ad hoc query tool generates. So that was kind of a keep it simple, stupid solution to this, instead of trying to parse out the SQL that the ad hoc query tool built. So the rest of this stuff is pretty just simple templated, templated XML. And so speaking of the template, that's another common thing that we do whenever we're auto-generating code. So now I'm in Visual Studio here. So if we look at how we actually chose to do this code generation, we've got a templates folder here, and I've got a text file in here just called listbuilder.txt. And I really like this solution when you're taking a template or a set of text, and you may be appending or replacing things in it with code, especially if you have multiple lines. So this template is 42, 43 lines long. So what we do is kind of build just the boilerplate template and put little replaceable things in it. So anything with an exclamation point, word exclamation point in it, we just pull this template into a string, and then we do a bunch of replaces. The alternative to this, and this is kind of what the old school stuff where I first learned how to program, how we would have done this. I think I've got a sample of this here. So this is some VB code that I pulled out of our old repository, where we've got a command builder or string builder, and you're doing a bunch of append lines. So that's kind of the old school way, at least that I've seen this done. And anybody who's tried to support something like this before has seen that it's difficult, because let's say I want to run this SQL statement. Well, I got to go and paste it into something like Notepad++, get rid of all the append lines, you know, reformat it so I can actually stick it in SSMS and run it, where it's so much easier if you just, you know, paste the whole thing into a text file, and then you can add a resources file to your project, and then you just drag the text in, and it'll be a file beneath that resources, the resources class, and you can access it directly as a string and start to do your replacements. So I'm going to go here. So this is the line where we go and grab the text from that that list builder and then start to do the replacements. So you can see we're replacing ID, header, name, you know, all this stuff to basically make it the list builder that we want from the template. And so I think the next thing I'll do is just go into a little more high level of how this actually works. So it's an add and an edit CLR form. And the reason that we did the CLR form is you could probably accomplish all of this with an SP form, but it would be pretty cumbersome. Using C# or VB.NET is quite a bit easier, and we're making API calls to the query, ad hoc query API endpoints to get the query metadata. So we just decided it was way easier to do all this coding in C# than to try and figure out how to do it in SQL. And so we'll look at the add form here. Might help if I just bring this out. So it's not super complicated. It's, you know, we've got some basic fields. You got the name, ad hoc query ID, the context information, a collection of output columns is probably the most complex piece of it. So this is the grid that populates when you pick an ad hoc query and shows you the field name and gives you the option to toggle visibility. And so if we look at the corresponding C# class for this, that's where it probably gets a little more interesting. So for any time you're using a CLR add or edit form or even a view form, you have to have public fields that match your field names that you defined in the XML spec. This little nugget here is something that I ended up digging through Blackbaud code for probably a half a day trying to figure out, okay, if I've got an XML field or a collection field in my spec, what do I need to define in my C# or my, you know, my CLR class? So the platform will actually talk to it, you know, because at runtime, it wants to populate these fields. And then if you've got a collection called output columns with field and is visible as sub form fields, you know, how do you do it? And so luckily I was able to find this. This may be documented better somewhere. This was a while ago, but what they want you to do is have an array of a class that has the public fields on it matching the collection fields. So if I just go to this, we've got it in a common class because it's shared between the add and the edit form. We just didn't want to define output column in the add and the edit form both. But so we've got a, you know, standalone class here called output column, and it has field and is visible in it. And again, that's to correspond to field and is visible here. And then in the declaration, you declare it as an array of that class. So kind of interesting. I don't know if anybody else has run into that that challenge. But again, this is one of these things that we've got in our code repository. We just go dig it up whenever we come across the question. So now we get into the save here. This is just some of it's relatively simple, typical Blackbaud CLR save code. Another kind of interesting design decision, it's interesting to me, the output field, or the way we save these output columns, kind of the old, the original way that I learned to do this SDK development was when you had a collection, you had a child table, right? So if you think about the way that you might solve for this is you're going to have one table that holds this data, right? So when you save, you're going to get one row in here. And then when you have a child or a collection, you create a child table that links up to this table. And then you populate each row in this collection is a row in the child table. We kind of stopped doing that unless, so when we have a scenario like this, we kind of run through and ask, would we ever need to query that data? Or does that data just live to support the add data form? And for this case, like output columns, we're never going to query the output columns. We do everything we need to generate the list builder in the save. These just need to be saved so we can persist the is visible choices when the user loads the edit form. And so the way we handle this is just it's an XML column in the table, and it's a lot more efficient in my mind, at least from a coding standpoint, because you don't have a child table to worry about, and you don't have to worry about merging new and edited and possibly deleted columns into that child table. Every time someone edits and saves, you just always save the XML over the field in the table. And so the only challenge is really, how do I serialize it, right? How do I turn this, I think it's a data form item array is what it comes through as, at least in the UI model. But in the back end of this form, it's just an array of output columns. And so we just got this little utility function here that goes and uses some regular old .NET code to do a default serialization of that class. And so we've got the corresponding deserialized columns in here as well, and that allows you to just load and save those collections as straight XML. And let's see, I guess I need to speed up. I think we got 5 minutes, but to put it in, to kind of try and wrap this up, we begin a transaction because we have two database actions that have to happen here in sequence. We save the row to the table. So this is just a regular SPWrap store procedure call. And then we've got these two utility classes that we use. This one, as it's named, it populates the list builder spec. Ad hoc query metadata is a class that we use to consolidate the ad hoc query code. So we make a couple of calls to the ad hoc query API. We do an ad hoc query process call, but we tell it don't return the data. That allows us to get the SQL. And then there's another call that we make. Well, once we get the SQL, we actually do a data adapter.fill schema, which gives us all the metadata for the columns. And so we loop through those, add those to a collection that is then passed into the list builder helper. Then one more API call to get the name and the record type. And so this is the one that we looked at earlier that actually goes through and does all the replacements of those, the templated values. And I believe we've got about 4 minutes left, if I'm correct. So I should probably pause for questions or comments on this.
Peggy is interested. Will this be available as a part of Expert Access, which I believe is the Zuri offering?
I believe we're going to add this to Expert Access, and I think I had asked Christian Barano, who another Zuri employee. I think he said we would make this available as a standalone tool as well.
Great.
But yeah, it'll be part of Expert Access. And for those of you who may not know what Expert Access is, Zuri's got a package of all of our our coolest. It's our toolbox that's for CRM clients. It's just a subscription, and you get access to a whole bunch of our. We've got 3 or 4 flagship products, and then we got a whole bunch of other little utilities, kind of like this one. This isn't meant to be a sales call. This is a tech call, though.
Banal asks, is there any way we can extend the existing out-of-the-box list builder, like adding more columns? Like we have data form extensions. Do we have DataList or Listbuilder extensions?
Unfortunately, no. So there's, well, I don't want to say no completely. Some of the Blackbaud query views allow for additional extensions to be added to them, but that's just for the query to be rendered in ad hoc query. So for a data list or a list builder, you pretty much need to create a new one if you want different functionality.
Okay. April asks, can you alter a list builder in the SDK?
Like an existing one? Like one that
April?
shipped with the product?
April, a custom one.
Okay. Well, I guess in the context of this tool, we do provide a way so you can edit the query. So I can add additional columns to this query, set the visibility on here, and what it does is just loads the spec again. So it'll load the exact same spec, same ID over again. So that's kind of like a modification. You can append or remove columns. One caveat to that, if you go to the page, well, that's the gift. If you go back to the page after you've modified the list builder, just like if you did it through the SDK, you may get an error about columns changing. And in that case, you'll need to go restore grid defaults here. So that basically deletes all of your saved settings for that list builder.
Okay.